There I am. Sorry about that, guys. I've had my whole studio upside down all weekend. But I got a nice surprise for you guys. I had a very talented guitarist come over, and I spent the weekend recording him, and then I stayed up all night last night putting together a video of different miking techniques. And please forgive my bad video editing. As I was watching it back today, there was a few little bloopers here and there. But it should be a lot of fun. And I have Pete Calandra here tonight, who's going to talk to you a little bit. And I've made you a co-host, Pete. And I think you can jump on there.
All right. Well, anyway, let's talk for a second. So, my name's Pete Calandra. Been teaching at Queens College. This is my 10th year as I'm an assistant. I'm a part-time professor, and I helped to create the MAP program, and helped to create this course, and I teach 3 other classes over the course of the academic semester. I teach Audio MIDI 1, Audio MIDI 2, and a film scoring class, and I've taught other things as well. I've been in Mike Mossman's class at times, subbing for him on his arranging class, and I've taught undergraduate composition classes. And my basic thing is that I've been a working professional, just like Ken, since the early 80s. I went to Queens College. I graduated in 1982, and then I came back in the mid-1990s and got my graduate degree. And all the while, even as an undergraduate, I was working as a professional musician, playing in bar bands at that time. And then in the 90s, I was playing piano on Broadway. And I did spend 30 odd years as one of the busiest freelance keyboard players in New York City. Broadway shows, big hit Broadway shows that I was in, like Miss Saigon, Les Miserables, Phantom of the Opera, Lion King, the original Little Shop of Horrors, which is where I got my start. I was in the Radio City Music Hall Orchestra for a summer. I played jazz gigs, recording sessions, concerts at Carnegie Hall with the New York Pops. I did touring shows. And while all this was going on, I taught myself technology, music technology, starting off with little hardware sequencers and then little MIDI setups in my apartment in Brooklyn in the mid-1980s, and a little 4-track cassette deck and everything. And then that led me to, in the late 1990s, I started getting a fair amount of work writing music for films and television. And at one point, I was incredibly busy for years writing film and television music and playing piano at night on Broadway and teaching at Queens College. And so I'm still fairly busy as a composer. I don't play on Broadway anymore. And I stopped doing that. It's for younger people. It's not for us old farts. But I bring the perspective of somebody who's worked in the industry and has used technology to advance my whole career. And that's sort of the position I take when I teach classes. So what I'm doing here today is I'm going to talk to you. You're all taking Recording Studio Fundamentals. Some of you are graduate students. Some of you are undergraduate students. Some of you might be music majors. Some of you might be just people who are interested in music. You can play a little bit of an instrument, and you're taking this Recording Studio Fundamentals. A couple of things. We have, for undergraduate students, we have an MAP minor, Music and Production. Right now it consists of 24 credits. We're working on dropping that down to 21 credits. Recording Studio Fundamentals is the first required class. There were 4 other classes. Audio MIDI 1 and 2, and Digital Recording and Composition 1 and 2, which is taught by Jim McElwain. And I'm teaching next semester Audio MIDI 1, and Audio MIDI 1 will be meeting on Thursdays at 4:40. It will be online. And Audio MIDI 1 takes some of the stuff that you've been working on in this particular class and does a really deep dive into learning how to use MIDI, and we go through all sorts of stuff in much greater detail than you've gone through in Recording Studio Fundamentals, which is sort of like a survey class to get you started with all of this stuff. And then towards the end of the semester, we start working with audio files and how to edit them properly. We do more detailed editing than you've done in this class and start to process some of those sounds. And if you're a graduate student and you're interested in writing music for media, let's say, well, I will tell you now that the only way to work in the field, whether it's television music, film music, any kind of music for media, is to become incredibly proficient in a DAW, learning how to sequence music in Pro Tools, in Logic, in Cubase, in Digital Performer. And whilst we typically use Pro Tools at the college, the principles and the way that I teach, all of those techniques can be easily transferred to any of the other DAWs because fundamentally they all do the same thing. It's just that they're a little bit different ways around things, but there's a piano editor in every one. There's a mixing console in every one. There's an edit or arrange page in every one. There's a piano roll editor in every one. There's velocity editing. There's duration. There's quantizing. There's transposing. There's, transforming notes. There's selecting notes. There's using the mouse and all the tools. All these things, the pencil tool, all these things exist in every DAW. So what I do is I go really deeply into teaching you how to use the MIDI aspect of it in the first semester class. So that's going to be on Thursdays at 4:40, and it is a required class if you're interested in being an MAP student. So I would suggest that you should contact me. I can pop my email into the chat if anybody's interested in that. PeteCalandra@gmail.com. So that's a class that is happening on Thursdays, and like I said, it's a required class for MAP. It's a continuation of some of the stuff you've learned in this class. It's a much deeper dive. Then another class that I want to talk to you about is happening on Fridays at 1:40, and it's being taught by somebody named Robbie Merkin. And Robbie, it's also going to be online, and it's a songwriting class. Robbie's was actually my freshman theory teacher at Queens College, and he had an incredible career. He worked on he was a big orchestrator and arranger in the 1980s and 90s on Broadway. He was the music director of Sesame Street for 7 years, nominated for multiple Emmy Awards. He did the orchestrations and arrangements for the Little Shop of Horrors movie and also the Little Mermaid. And he's just a really articulate person. He was the salutatorian when he graduated from Queens College. He did really well, and he was a doctoral student when I met him. And he stopped doing that and started working in the city. And he's just, got a really great way of presenting ideas. He's incredibly articulate. He's very creative. He knows a lot about songwriting. And if you want to, and any styles, he's really not someone who is sort of tied down to you have to do it a certain way. He's very open to learning, to presenting ideas in different ways. But, it'd be a really interesting class. It's one that I actually wish that I could have taken when I was an undergraduate student, because he actually did teach the class back then, also a class like this back then. So that's Fridays at 1:40. And again, for all these classes, you really need to contact me. I'm the MAP area coordinator. So you'll need to just contact me to get permission to sign up for these classes. And then there's Digital Composition and Recording 2, which you would be eligible to take. And also it is another MAP requirement. And that's taught by Jim McElwain. And Jim was he started the recording program up at SUNY Purchase, and he's a professor emeritus up there. and he teaches for us one class a semester, and it's it's kind of like a little bit more abstract application of composition using technology, and he doesn't require Pro Tools. He doesn't care what DAW you work in. So that doesn't really have a time. That's asynchronous. So, and again, you'll have to contact me about that, and I can put you in touch with Jim if you'd like to talk to him a little bit more detailed about the class. But I'll need to just, sort of everything has to sort of run through me, and then we can get you guys registered. So that's basically it. And I was just wondering, are there any questions about that? Are any of you interested in pursuing this further? Yay, nay, maybe, question mark?
I'm okay for now.
All right. Well, so again, just to recap, there's there's actually 4 classes being offered next semester. Recording Studio Fundamentals, which I'll be teaching. Audio MIDI 1, which I'll be teaching. That's Thursdays at 4:40. And all of our classes will be online. There'll be Digital Composition and Recording 2, taught by Jim McElwain, which is asynchronous. And then on Fridays at 1:40, there's Songwriting with Robbie Merkin. And that should be a really fun class. He's done presentations in the other 2 classes of both of my classes and in Mike Mossman's class. And he's already getting students registered for the class. So I would highly recommend all of you to check out one of those classes. And yeah, that's basically it. So Ken, I don't really have much more to say.
Noam's got his hand up there, Pete.
Okay, go ahead.
Hey, I just wanted to ask if you're going to teach your film scoring class next semester.
I only teach that in the fall. There's not enough. I can't teach 3 classes in a semester. I've done that once or twice, and it's just too much for me. So and there's not enough interest to teach it every semester. So I just basically teach it in the fall. So I'll be teaching it again next fall. If you want to take a look at that on my YouTube channel, Pete Calandra Music.
Yeah, I've been following along, actually.
Okay, well, great. So you know what the class is pretty good, and we go over a lot of really cool stuff in that class. I really enjoy teaching it, and the students do really well. They're just actually this week they're handing in their first assignment not their first assignment, the first assignment where they're scoring to picture. I gave them the trailer to a really amazing film called Loving Vincent. It's a 60-second trailer, and they're scoring it. They're going to be handing it in Thursday. So that's the first. All the assignments up to this point has been training them to different aspects of writing music for picture, which is much different than writing music in the abstract. There's a whole set of concepts that you really need to internalize before you can be successful as a film composer. And hopefully that my experience with doing it for the past 20 years can make it a little bit easier journey for people. And that's the same with my audio MIDI classes. The experience that I've had, I hope that I can translate that in a way that will make it easier. Because back when Ken and I were learning how to do this stuff, there were no YouTube channels. There were manuals that were badly written, and if you got stuck, you had to get on the phone and wait and call tech support for some company in California, and you might have to wait on the phone for an hour and have some tech talk you through something, and it was basically a nightmare to try to work because the computers weren't powerful enough, the software wasn't mature enough, and there was so many outside of the computer connections that had to be made to make anything work that the slightest kink in a cable could ruin your whole setup. And then then there was the price of computers, where it was much more expensive, and hard drives were insanely expensive back then. Well, I think I got my first 750 megabyte hard drive was like $800, right? So now you got a phone that you can buy for $1,000 that has a terabyte of memory in it. So and that's a whole phone, which is much more powerful than our studios were back 20 years ago. Anyway, I just wanted to come on and introduce myself to you guys and yak for a minute and promote these classes, and hopefully I'll see some of you next semester. I am, but will likely to try to start the map in the fall if that's an option since... Okay, great, Christopher. Yes, you can, in the fall, you can take digital recording and composition 1. Great, Adrian. Right. Nothing is, Daniel, nothing is over the winter. We don't, we've been working on this for 10 years. And let me just tell you something. To get anything done at Queens College is like watching molasses on a glacier. It takes forever. There's so much bureaucracy and so many levels of approvals that you have to go through. And nothing is easy. And then there's the side issue of budget and how the budgets keep on getting slashed, and we have to make do with more. And like, for example, I could, so, and then there's so we have to have a minimum number of students to run these classes, right? And over the winter break, also, everything is so congested that I personally don't have the time to teach 4 hours a day, 5 days a week for 4 weeks to fill up a semester, right? That just doesn't work for any of our instructors. So we sort of have to do this the way it is. I'm hoping that, at some point in the future that this program will be running really well and that we will have a nice studio in the college, because we sort of have we have a great music building. For those of you that have never been there, the music building is amazing. It's already 25 years old, but it's still a really incredible space. The auditorium, Lefrak Hall, is a beautiful concert hall. But when they put together this beautiful building, they budgeted for an academic electronics studio instead of a recording studio, because that's the head that they had back then. So, we got a grant like 5 years ago to refurbish one of the rooms, and 5 years later, and it's still, nothing's happened. There's been a lot of meetings, and the price of construction has gone up. So now that money that we had is not enough to do the work that needs to be done. So that's just sort of a problem with all the city university, city and state stuff. Everything takes forever to do because you're dealing with taxpayer money, and everything has to be approved. The layers of bureaucracy is insane. So that's why there'll be no over the winter. Okay, so I'm reading your comments now. Great. All right, so hopefully I'll see some of you in the spring and some of you in the fall. So in the typically the way the schedule works is that digital recording and composition 1 is in the fall, and digital recording and composition 2 is in the spring. Audio MIDI 1 is in the spring. Audio MIDI 2 is in the fall. You've taken this class, so you can take our classes sort of out of order, depending upon what you want to take. So you could take Audio MIDI 2 in the fall, or you could take digital comp and recording in the fall. Film scoring is in the fall. Recording studio fundamentals is every semester, and we're hopefully going to try to run songwriting every semester. We'll see how it goes this semester, and we'll see if Robbie wants to teach it again in the fall. So that's still up in the air, but that's sort of the plans now. We've got other classes that we want to add eventually, but it's about budget and getting students in the seats. One other thing I wanted to say, so there's 15 credits involved in the MAP minor. This class, Audio MIDI 1 and 2, Digital Recording and Comp 1 and 2, so that's 15 credits. And then the other 6 credits are electives. And those electives can be my film scoring class, the songwriting class, it can be the business of music, which Mike Mossman teaches. It could be any music class that you're eligible to take in the music department if you're not a music major. It can be the physics of sound, which the science department teaches, which is a great class that I recommend everyone take. It could be any kind of a class that where you're working inside of the computer with media. So it could be a photography class somebody took where they learned how to use Photoshop and Lightroom to edit digital media, right? Which is very similar to what you do with audio. So it's that kind of a thing. And then that's the minor. So right now it's living at 24 credits, but we're working right now. We have a meeting. I sent something in yesterday to cut that down to 21 credits, which I'm hoping to do to make it more in line with all the other minors in the music department. So anyway, that's basically it.
Excellent, Pete. Well, I've taken a couple of Pete's classes, and man, I can highly recommend them. He's just fantastic and incredibly knowledgeable, explains things well, and you just get it. You know, he's very, very good.
Thank you, Ken. Yeah, I will say this, you know, and I would say this to one of the graduate students there that are in the music department, whether you're music ed or a jazz major, which are the two food groups from the graduate department that take these classes, that if you're going to go out in the world today, your success, aside from how good you are at your instrument, how well you can compose and arrange, how well you are good you are at explaining and creating lesson plans if you're going to be a teacher, you're going to need to know music technology. There's just no escaping it. It's everywhere. If you're going to be a public school teacher, your kids are going to be playing around with GarageBand, you know, and they're going to be doing stuff, or you can. I had a student named Julie about 8 years ago, and she was a Montessori teacher, and she was in the jazz department. She was a vocalist, and she had a choir concert that she had to give after about a month of my class, and her accompanist got sick, you know, really badly sick, and they couldn't find anybody, and she stayed up 3 nights in a row, and she sequenced the entire accompaniment for her choral concert, and she used that accompaniment played off of her laptop, and she just conducted along with it, right? So there's all sorts of uses for it in the school, and there is in New York State, I don't know exactly what it is. I still have to research this a little bit more, but I've been told that there's a technology component that's going to be required of teaching any kind of school in the city limits, and I think possibly even in the States, in New York State. So, yeah, music technology is a part of that. So, all right. That's about it from my end.
Great, Pete. Well, thanks so much for dropping by and telling everybody about these great classes you got going. Thank you.
Yes. Well, I'm thankful that we're able to teach them. And, hopefully I'll see some of you later on. Catch you guys later. See you, Ken.
Right. Thanks, Pete. Okay. So, I've got a little... I don't even know what you call this. I've got a little PowerPoint and a bunch of movies that I put together of the session this week. I also... I put in your folder that I sent you the link for, there's a Pro Tools session of the recordings that I did this weekend. So you can open that up and you can see and listen to the different miking techniques. I think, it's once you get into it, it's very, very enlightening, and I think you'll enjoy it. So I wanted to talk about planning for a recording session, because in order to have a successful session, you really have to have your stuff together. And that doesn't mean that you have to be a recording engineer. That can just mean you have a friend coming over to record, or whatever you want to do with your recording skills, or even for your own recording. You don't want to be thinking about the technology if you're trying to be creative. So you want to try to get this stuff under your belt. But a few bullet point things to really think about are make sure that you confirm with your client and be on time, and ask them if there's anything that they need special, And a big one is make a checklist of everything you need to do check all your gear, make sure it's all working, do a test recording, tidy up all your cables in the studio, prepare the Pro Tools session or whatever you're recording in, and make sure the artist walks into a comfortable, relaxed environment. Because the best performances happen when all the technical aspects are invisible and you can just concentrate on the music. And if you're stressed out about a session, they're going to know it, they're going to feel it, and they're going to be stressed too. So this is what I set up for my recording session the other day. So I recorded this guitarist, and this is my setup. I have basically two setups going right now. I have one that's just for Zoom, and then I have one that's for Pro Tools for recording and tracking. And so my Zoom end of things, I brought all of my microphones, like this microphone I'm speaking in now, and my lavalier mics, and I brought them in and I recorded them into OBS. And that's how I got one of my inputs. The other half of the session, all the audio that I'm recording, I didn't want to have it in OBS because OBS is not really professional for audio. So I have that all recorded in Pro Tools. So if we kind of do our same type of signal path, this is one path here. I have all my mics going in to this little mixer, as well as my outputs from my computer, so I can hear, if I'm playing iTunes or something like that. And so that's going into my mixer, and that's my one setup that goes to OBS, and that goes to Zoom. So that's my main deal there. And that's what I use for you guys, too. And then the other one is a recording setup. And so on the back of my audio interface here, there are 4 inputs for microphones, but there are actually 8 inputs total on the back. And so I have 2 microphones, micing the guitar, going into inputs 1 and 2, and a third microphone too, which we didn't do electric guitar. We ran out of time. And that third input I used for another additional acoustic guitar mic. And then the other thing that you want to set up when you're doing a session is a lot of times the musicians will be fine just listening to your mix of Pro Tools. But sometimes they want to hear something different. Like if you're working with a drummer, he's going to want to hear the click track really loud. And if you try to listen to that in the control room, it's deafening because he's playing behind a big kit of drums. So I set up a separate mix out of a separate set of outputs, and those go to a headphone amp. So I got my main outputs going to my speakers, and then my secondary outputs are a Q mix, it's called, or a headphone mix, and I can blend whatever I want. And the way you set those up are with aux sends. And you can just, you can use the aux send section to send directly out an output. And I'm going to go over that in a future class. But I just kind of wanted to give you an idea of the complexity of the setup. Whenever you add Zoom and OBS into anything, it gets incredibly complicated. So here's some pictures. This is me setting up the first night. I have some video lights up here for the talent. And I have my microphones, and I've got a little camera here. And you notice that there's no cable. Well, there's this one cable over there because I was positioning lights. But there's no cables going across the floor. There's no tripping hazards. Everything's neat. And this is my cheesy little guitar from when I was 12 years old. But it still sounds great. It's an old Yamaha classical guitar. And so I was testing all the mics. And that's showing my video lighting. This is my front of my studio here. And this is where I sit and do the class. And here's my little camera for him. You want to make sure that the microphones, when your talent enters the room, you don't want them bumping the microphones. So I generally scoot the chair back or scoot the microphones back and give them room to get in there and finagle their guitar and all that kind of thing, so you don't get your microphones bumped because they're expensive and you don't want to replace them. And this is just showing the artist camera view. And so this is kind of what I chose here. The other thing that was also important for me is I could have put him more towards the back of the room back here, but because this is just a regular room, it's not a studio, I have these panels all around my studio. See these panels all around here? Those are all sound absorbing panels. And so I wanted to make sure that I pushed him up far enough into the panels so he wasn't resonating in this hallway that's down the hall there. And this is just my desk setup. This is my speaker controller here. And this is my little video switcher here. And underneath here is a mixer that I use for when I'm doing automation. And over here is a headphone amp, a very nice headphone amp. But this is probably one of the most crucial pieces of gear that I have, this little tiny Bose speaker. And it's my real world mixing speaker. I've got some beautiful Proax, and I've got my Yamaha NS10s, as well as there's some Tannoys back here. I've got speakers all over the place. But this little guy, I'm telling you, everybody has these, and you listen to them, and if your mix translates on that, you're doing okay. Okay, so I'm all set up here. And when the client walks in, you want to be as ready as you possibly can be. I've checked all the microphones. I've checked the headphones. I've got a guitar stand and a tuner sitting here for him. There's a pair of mics here. And I also have a tube mic over here. And I'll have a little table and some water here eventually. And then over here I'll be recording. So when you're working with a singer or a guitarist, you want to make sure that the stool is quiet. You don't want to have anything that rattles or creaks. And you certainly don't want a chair with rollers, because you're going to be miking a very soft instrument. Okay, and so the next setup that you need to do is set up your Pro Tools session for the client. And this just kind of walks you through what I did. He sent me a few backing tracks, TV tracks we call them. It's all the music except for the lead instrument. And so he sent me a few tracks so he could play along. And here's how to set those up. And I can go over this with you guys again too. I did it very quickly because I was in a hurry to get set up for the session. So when I made this video, I'm talking very quickly. But this is a very important thing to be able to do, to be able to pull in backing tracks and to align them to the click and make sure that everything's in sync. And we've talked about this before, but let's just take a look at this video. Okay, so I'm getting ready for my client to come over, and so I have to get everything set. So I'm going to import his guitar tracks he sent me. He's going to play along with a track, and I'll import them in. All right, so I have 3 different backing tracks here. Let's just take a listen and see what we have. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try to figure out the tempo of this so I can put it to a click. It just makes it easier to have the session already at a click. So I'm going to go to tab to transient, and I'm going to put my cursor down, and I'm going to tab to that first transient. I'm going to separate, delete, and I can drag this all the way to the beginning of the song. And I listen to the beginning here. Okay, so that's the 8th measure there on that big downbeat. I'm going to separate my region there. I'm going to select this section, and I'm going to hit Command-I, bring up our dialogue that we've been using, and I'm going to make this measure 9 because it's 8 bars long, and that should give me roughly the tempo, which is 71.124. Now, I know that the client probably worked at 71, so I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to get rid of this all the stuff here. I'm going to undo, Undo again. I'm just going to change my tempo to 71 here. Make sure you're back at the top before you add your tempo. Don't do like I did. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to the end of the song and make sure it stayed in sync. Okay, so there we go. So there's the first song done. Now I'm going to take the next song and I'm going to move it to the end of this first song. And I'm going to go to grid mode and I'm going to put grid mode on 1 bar. And I'm going to line up this track so that it starts right on a measure. And I'm going to listen to the next song. Actually, I can look at the song right here and see that it's at 110. He put it in the title, which a lot of musicians do, and that's awesome. So we're going to make a marker for this first song, which is called Cirrus. And then I'm going to make a marker for the second song, City Jam. And I'm going to go ahead and right here, I'm going to type in a new tempo, which I know what it is, 110. You check it. Check the end. Okay, so that one's all lined up, ready to go. One more song. And with my grid in bar mode, I'm going to slide this all the way down here and put it on the beginning of a bar. And this last one's called Miranda. I'm going to hit enter. Type in Miranda. I'm going to zoom in. Okay, so I don't have any idea what the tempo is on this. So I'm going to find the first downbeat I can using tab to transient. Turn off the click. 2, 3, 4, 2, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4. So this one actually threw me off a little bit. I was trying to rush through it, and I didn't realize. Right now, I'm going to grab this little first section, and I'm just going to snap this with shuffle mode so that it goes back to a bar line, just so I can find the tempo. I didn't realize the beat turned around. This region, I'm going to identify beat, and it starts at 188, and it's 4 bars later, 192. That's correct. Let's see what we have. So I had to include that little bit at the beginning. That was actually the downbeat. Okay, so that took a little finagling, but I got there eventually. So all 3 songs are lined up, ready to go. And now I'm going to make 3 audio tracks. Okay, so now I have my 3 guitar tracks here. And I'm going to set up my inputs. So that's a stereo track that we'll use for my XY mics. And then the next one, I'm going to put in my tube mic and then the fourth mic. So we have 1, 2 on the first one. We have 3 and 4. Alrighty, so I wanted to talk a little bit about dealing with clients and how to make them feel comfortable. And I feel like this is kind of one of my strong suits. When musicians come in to record, even if they've recorded their whole life, they still get nervous when you hit the red light. And they come in and they've been driving in traffic and maybe they're upset or they've, haven't had breakfast or whatever's going on in their head. Your job is to try to get a performance out of them. And in order to do that, you need to make them relax and you need to get them to calm down. And if you start if you start recording someone and it's jittery and they're acting nervous or something, you just get them to relax. And there's a couple of things you can do. You can do something simple like, hey, what'd you have for breakfast this morning? That kind of anything to just get their mind off the nervousness. Like I got my friend to talk about his guitars, and all musicians like to talk about their guitars. That's really an important part to getting a session started successfully. The first one is be prepared and make sure your gear works. That's the big one. So you walk in and you hit record and it works. It's nothing that slows down a session or puts a damper on a session like not having it together. Next one is, this is always a simple thing, but show hospitality. Offer him a drink. Show them where the toilet is. Whatever you need to do, make them comfortable. And always show respect to the musician. Even if you're not a fan of their playing, even if they're a beginner musician, everyone's at their own levels and everyone has their strengths and weaknesses. So you need to be respectful. So with that said, here's the first video here. So today we have a guest and his name is Steven Douros. And God, we've been friends a long time now. We work on the road with Toto together, and he is the lighting director for Toto, but he's also an amazing guitarist. And I'm not going to embarrass him, but I usually make fun of him because it's more fun. But this is Steven Douros. He also has a nickname, and you'll hear me call him that throughout the video because that's what I've been calling him forever. His nickname is Astro. And Astro, should we tell the story of Astro?
Oh, sure.
Go ahead. You go ahead and tell the Astro story.
Well, Astro is short for AstroTurf, meaning green. For when I first started with Toto, I was 23 back in '99, and it was the first summer tour I'd ever been on, and or any tour. And we were going to take a tour bus, and I didn't know it was a tour bus. They just said, hey, we're taking the bus to Biloxi. And I said, what, Greyhound? And the band, everybody was just like, oh my God, they're dying laughing. They're like, where did you guys get this guy? No. And so someone called me Astro. He's green as AstroTurf. That's what it was. And then someone said, he's Astro. And it kind of stuck. After it was Dirk, I think, that called me that. So,
right.
Yeah, I think it was Dirk.
So I call him either Astro, but I usually just call him Stro because it's too hard to say two syllables,
Right. These days, you guys mostly call me Stro because I'm not so green anymore. So.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, good. I like that.
500 plus shows or more,
Right. So Astro's agreed to come over today and help us demonstrate some mics, and I'm really looking forward to hearing his playing. He's a great musician and a good friend, and glad to have him here.
Well, thanks so much, Ken, for having me. I'm happy and thrilled to be here, and hope we do this again, and I'll do the best I can after, a little bit rusty, but I'll do my best.
You'll be fine. All right, well, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Okay, so that's a tube mic. And then let's hear the stereo pair. We're just listening to microphone placement right now. Let me turn off the fan here. So, Stro, how about we do this? How about we have you just talk about the guitars,
Sure.
and then we'll have you play each one of them.
When I toured with Otmar Liebert, he had a couple Lester DeVoe guitars, and I played his guitar. This guitar is very similar to his. This is a Western red cedar top, has cypress sides and a Spanish cedar neck, but it's a beautiful sounding guitar. Of course, I'm using a pick. If traditional flamenco, you wouldn't use a pick. And beautiful high notes. These are very dynamic instruments too, so you can get very, or if you dig in, it'll definitely, it's got some snap to it, and that's what they do. They're supposed to be. Especially with new strings on it like I have here. This is a 1995 Herman Vasquez Rubio flamenco guitar, which is my first that I got in '97. My first flamenco guitar. Before I was learning on the classical, and Paco had said, "It's time for you to get a real flamenco guitar," and he actually helped me pick this out. It was such a great buying experience at the time because it was very like a private purchase kind of thing. He had brought a bunch of guitars over to his place. And Paco helped me pick this one out. This was by far the best one out of the batch. It's a beautiful sounding guitar. It's been my number one for years, probably because it was my first and just because it sounds and plays amazing. So both of these guitars I'm truly blessed to have. They're both amazing in different ways. And this has a very pretty tone, being a spruce top. Very different, a little bit more bell-like. Hey! All right.
This is Pumbaa. Pumbaa loves
Hi, Pumbaa.
acoustic guitar. For some reason, that's his favorite. Get out of here, Pumbaa. Go, 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 go.
Yeah, this sounds very different than the other one, and they both sound amazing in different ways. This is going to be more bell-like. A lot of harmonics. Very mellow, a lot more mellow. But also it can get really loud.
So right now before we get started recording, I'm just listening to a few different microphones. And so what I have is a pair of Neumann KM184 set up at 110 degrees and about 6 inches apart with the capsules. And then I have a tube mic sitting here too. And we're just playing around right now with positioning and trying to get a feel for how the guitar sounds. So let's hear it now, Stro. And what I've done is I've swung this microphone. This microphone on this side was picking up too much because that's where all this sound is coming from his fingers and from the hole. And so I'm moving this microphone around and keep playing a little bit. So by moving this mic around, I'm changing the stereo field. So here's without the tube mic. So that's with the tube mic blended in now. And you can hear when I shift this mic, the way things changed in the stereo field. So what I'm trying to do is kind of, most of the sound comes out of the hole. And so I'm trying to split the hole basically with the microphones. And that way the sound's going to be balanced. But if you point directly at the hole, it'll get boomy.
Sounds great with this combination of mics, Ken. I really like the sound of it.
Okay, so that was ORTF miking, and it's a very wide stereo miking. So these first examples are all different stereo miking techniques, and they all have their strengths and weaknesses. And but that first one was ORTF, and so now we're going to listen to him play along with the track and hear how that particular sound fits in with the track. If you listen to the sides, you can hear that it's a very wide stereo going on. okay, Stro. We don't have to do the whole song. It's just for demo. So yeah, it's got a really wide, beautiful sound to it. It's good for closer miking situations, so you're not too far from the guitar. You can see here that I'm less than a foot away, and then you can see the secondary mic here is pointed kind of towards the body and the bridge a little bit. If you want more bottom, you can just twist this around and aim it a little more towards the F hole. But that's ORTF, stereo miking. And the way that it works is it has, you have two different microphones, and you spread them 110 degrees, and you have the capsules, and it's about 6.5 inches apart, something like that. And with this particular, it's a very scientific angle here. And when you cancel these out, when you sum them to mono, an important part of working with stereo miking is that when you sum it to mono, a lot of times if you're going to do some kind of broadcast or you never know what's going to happen when you send your music out. If you send it out for an ESPN thing or something like that, well, maybe they're going to accidentally broadcast it in mono. Once it leaves your hands, you don't have any control over it anymore. So that's the reason that all of your projects you should be able to pan them right to the center, both stereo mics right to the center, and they don't cancel out so much. Remember, we were talking about all the phase cancellation with distance and shifting the waveforms. These two, the two techniques that I'm talking about, are actually all four techniques that I'm going to talk about. They minimize the amount of cancellation that happens when you go to mono, when you sum things together. So that's ORTF. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm switching the mics now. And I'm going to, instead of using the 110 degree setup that I had before, and I have my trusty Carpenter square here. Yeah, that's 90 degrees. I'm trying to get these at exactly. And there's a couple of different ways to do this too. I don't have exactly the right mic clip to do this. This is called a stereo bar, and it's designed to do this. It's got two mic clips on one little bar. So now I'm going to just mute the tube mic for a minute. But a lot of times... So now I have my XY set up, and as I move the mics around, there's the hole. It's very boomy. Usually the sweetest part comes right over here, right where the neck meets the body. And if I go towards the bridge, you get more pick. So I'm going to try right in here. Alrighty, so let's do another take with a different mic setup and see how this feels. Let's play along with the track. I took the tube mic out for right now. We could listen to it again. Play now with the tube mic too. So the tube mic adds all that nice bottom. What I'm doing is I'm watching the meters here, and I'm trying to get the sides more even by the mic placement. So this is just the XY mics. Play now. So I'm just going to even out the mic pre's a little bit now. Turn down one side. All right. Let's try one and see what happens here, Stu. So to me, this miking has a much more focused sound. It doesn't have a width like the other miking did. And if you go through those tracks and listen in the Pro Tools session, you can really hear it when you just A-B them next to each other. And because the capsules are so close together on this one, you almost never have phasing issues if you get your angle right. If you're exactly 45 degrees. It's kind of a very safe way to record stereo. It's kind of hard to mess it up as long as you point the mics in the right direction and get them balanced. It's a nice technique. And it keeps the lead instrument in the center of the picture more. Okay, great. Nice job. So that's XY miking. And if you look in this diagram, the way they have it done, I didn't have the right mic clip for, but the way they have it done is they have one microphone above the other. And that has less blockage. So if I had mine back here, right back here. And so the bodies of the microphone are actually blocking the pattern a little bit. If you have them on right on top of each other like this, it works even a little nicer. So that's XY miking. The first one was ORTF, and then this is XY miking. So next we're going to try a different technique, and I'm going to use two different microphones to capture two different sounds. So first I'm going to go to my console, and I'm going to mute the microphones. Actually, I could just mute them right here in Pro Tools. So here we go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of this right mic. And I'm just going to put it off to the side. And then I'm going to try a couple of different things here. So instead of using the stereo positioning like we had before, I'm going to concentrate more on trying to get, this is the picking hand, and it has a lot of attack naturally, so I'm going to use a little warmer mic. And this hand has more of the warm tone, so I'm going to use a little brighter mic. I have to be careful not to get a lot of string squeaks. So we'll take a listen and see how it sounds. And I'm about, I'd say about, 5 inches away, something like that. And the same with this mic here.
And this is the 12th fret right there.
Right, and so that's what I'm aiming for, right where the neck meets the body. And then this other mic, so what I'm doing is I'm kind of splitting the distance between the sound hole. Right? I'm trying to get roughly the microphones in about the same position. I might have to pull this mic back a little bit because it's a tube mic and it has a lot of bottom. So I'm just going to play around with the positioning now and try to find a sweet spot. And I'm listening also for the phase of the microphones. And as you bring the microphones closer together, there'll be more phase issues, and as you spread them apart, you'll have a wider sound. All right, so now I'm going to bring the mics closer together. That's a more focused sound, but you're going to have more phasing issues. And then if I come here, and if I want to get more of the body of the guitar, mic a little more closer to the bridge. How does that feel, Astro?
Nice.
Okay, let's stop. I want to play with that mic positioning some more. I'm not happy with that. Okay, so I started recording and I didn't like the phase that was happening. So I'm going to have Astro, just going to move the mics around a little bit. Okay, let's try that again.
Okay.
So this is the widest of the techniques. It's called a spaced pair, and these are two cardioid microphones that are spaced apart. And it has additional width because one of the microphones is fatter. It's the tube mic has more bottom. And sometimes I'll take this type of miking and I won't pan it quite so hard left and right to bring it focused back in a little more. All right, so that's spaced cardioid miking. Spaced pair miking is very useful. This particular use of it, it's okay. I think I like some of the other stereo micings a little better, but for classical recording, you can use a spaced pair of Omni microphones, and you spread them out quite a bit more. And they're beautiful sounding. You get a really nice stereo, like an ambience type of sound. And that's spaced pair miking. So, this setup is an MS Technique. And what I've done here is I have two microphones. They shouldn't be actually touching, so I'll have to move them a little bit. But the bottom microphone is a figure 8 pattern. And this microphone is split into two channels. And the two channels, one side I'll flip the phase. And so you have these two lobes that are completely out of phase, if you will, or two channels that are out of phase. So when you hit mono, this microphone completely disappears. The top microphone is a cardioid, and it's pointed right at the source. So its pattern is just picking up on this side. And so we have the two sides on the figure 8 here. And when they combine together, they form a really nice stereo pattern that when you hit mono, they completely cancel out. And so if you have to do a mono broadcast, you'll only hear the top mic, which already sounds great. So that's MS Technique.
Thanks, Ken.
Let's hear it. So the fader on the left. Mono mic. Yeah, that's the mono mic. So you want to get a great sound on that first, and then here's the figure 8 that's out of phase. And you hear it sounds canceled and strange. So now I'm going to bring the main mic up, and then I'll just feather in the figure 8 mic to give it some width. If I push it too far, it gets artificial. But the nice thing about this technique is that you can make decisions later about how wide you want it. Okay, let's try recording some of that and see how that feels. It's also a very focused type of sound. It's depending on how much you push up the outside microphones or the figure 8 microphones, you can make it wider, but it still has a nice focus to it. This technique works very good for classical recording. It's great for cello and solo cello and because you have control over the stereo width later, you can even just use the mono mic if you want it in the mix. So the reason I use the same song over and over is so I can make the Pro Tools session for you guys, and you would be able to compare the different microphones using the same source material. Otherwise, it's kind of hard to tell. Great. Great. So that's MS Technique. You have a preference which one you like so far, Astro?
I kind of like the first one you had with the wide. And
Yeah.
the tube mic over here, it had a lot of nice bottom, and then it also captured a nice wide spectrum with the stereo on the top.
Great. I think I like that one too. So this is the MS Technique that I was talking about, and this is basically two microphones. You've got your figure 8 microphone on either the top or the bottom of a cardioid. This one is showing it on top of an Omni microphone, which you can do also. But I wanted more focus, and so I put a cardioid here for my main microphone. If you used an Omni for your main microphone, you're going to be picking up a lot of the room. And because I'm in a small room here, I don't want to emphasize the room too much because it just gets nasty sounding. It sounds like sheetrock. And you don't want to overemphasize it. So I make my mic choices based on the situation and the instrument. And the more that you play around with these different techniques, the more that you can get familiar with them and know what to use in which situation. So I have another little video here of a guy explaining this technique. This is a very, very cool technique. And it's just a short video, but he really explains it well, and I wanted to share that with you. There's our microphones. That's the MS Technique.
This video will demonstrate the mid-side or MS recording technique. The mid-side or MS technique uses two microphones placed as close together as possible. One mic faces straight ahead at your sound source and the other faces 90 degrees to the left. The sideways facing mic, the side in mid-side, must be a figure 8 or bidirectional mic. The mic facing straight ahead, the mid in mid-side, is usually a cardioid, but can be another figure 8 or an omnidirectional. The two mics are recorded on separate tracks, which are then matrixed into stereo. You do the matrixing on your digital audio workstation or analog mixer, and the end result is a true stereo recording where you can adjust the stereo width after the fact. So you can record a piano in MS and make it wider or narrower in your mix, or record a guitar amp in a live-sounding room and decide later how much of the room versus the direct sound of the amp you want to hear. To understand this deceptively simple technique, you'll want to be sure you understand the microphone polar patterns involved. Here is a polar pattern chart of a figure 8 or bidirectional microphone. A polar pattern chart tells you the sensitivity of a microphone for sounds arriving from any angle. At 0 degrees, a figure 8 has a sensitivity of 1, meaning it will produce the loudest output signal for sound sources directly in front of the mic. If a sound comes from 45 degrees, the output will be only about 0.7 times as loud as if the sound came from directly in front of the mic. And if the sound comes from 90 degrees, the output of the mic will be 0, or silence. I have colored the front lobe of the figure 8 blue and the rear lobe purple to indicate polarity. Figure 8 mics reverse the polarity of signals arriving from the rear. If you record a sound from the front of the mic, positive air pressure will produce a positive output voltage. But the same positive pressure at the rear of the mic will produce a negative output voltage. If you duplicate an audio track in your digital audio workstation, reverse its polarity, and mix it back with the original, you will hear silence, as long as the faders and pan knobs on the two tracks are set the same. As you will soon see, mid-side recording depends on this effect. We are going to use a cardioid for the mid-mic. Cardioid mics pick up sound from the front and sides and reject sounds from the rear. Omnidirectional mics pick up sound from all directions. Neither of these patterns alter polarity. To record an acoustic guitar using the mid-side technique, point the mid-cardioid mic right at the guitar. Place a figure 8 mic right above or below the mid mic as close as possible. Point the figure 8 mic sideways to the left. Record the two mics to separate mono tracks. Once you have recorded them, make a duplicate of the figure 8 side track. Pan the original side track all the way to the left because the mic was pointing to the left. Pan the mid mic center because it was pointing center. Then pan the duplicate side track all the way to the right and reverse its polarity. In any digital audio workstation, you can easily invert or flip the polarity of a track with a plugin, but we will use a Pro Tools Audio Suite plugin to destructively invert this track so that you can see the result in the waveform. If you have an analog console, you might also find a polarity flip button on every channel. Set all three faders the same for now. What we have just done in Pro Tools is the matrixing. You are sending the side mic to the left, the mid mic to the left and right, and the reverse polarity side mic to the right. You should already hear stereo. This is where the magic comes in. The figure 8 mic that you pointed left picks up sound from the left, but it also picks up reverse polarity sound from the right. So we will call this track left minus right to indicate the relative polarity. The duplicate side mic track has had its polarity flipped, so on this track the sounds that arrived from the left of the side mic are in reverse polarity, and the sound that arrived from the right of the side mic are in positive polarity. We will call this track right minus left. The cardioid mic picked up sound from the left and the right without reversing polarity, so we will call the mid track left plus right. We panned the mid mic to the center, sending it to both the left and right outputs of our mixer. We also panned the unaltered side mic track to the left. So at the left output of our mixer we have left plus right plus left minus right. So at the left output of your DAW, you have doubled the left and canceled out the right because of the way the polarities combine. At the right output, you added the mid mic to the polarity flipped side mic. So you have left plus right minus left. So this time, the left cancels out and the right reinforces. The result is stereo. I'll pull up each component of the mix separately so you can hear. Here is the side mic by itself. Now we'll add the right mic before polarity inversion. And after polarity inversion. If you are listening to this on speakers, you might notice an unnaturally wide image that seems wider than the speakers themselves. Now here comes the mid mic to solidify the stereo image. If you pull the side faders up and down, you will hear the stereo image get wider and narrower. You can set the faders wherever you find the best stereo width for your project. Some DAWs come with an MS Decoder plugin, so you can just record your two mics to a stereo track and matrix them with a simple plugin. And now, a bit of fun.
Okay, so I know that's really scientific, and you don't need to know the scientific part as much as just how to actually use the technique. And it basically means that you take a figure 8 microphone and you take that one signal and you put it on two tracks. one of the tracks, you flip the polarity, and that's all you really have to do. And then you push up, then you have a center microphone also, and the center microphone will make the blend and make it a stereo track as opposed to this weird phasey thing of just the two capsules of the figure 8. So, again, it's very scientific, but it's interesting to know how it works scientifically, but you don't have to know that to use the technique. So this is just another song, just so we can see. We went back to that first miking that he liked. So you can see what it sounds like when you play a little harder. Okay, let's punch there. So when I punched in, you can look at the waveforms here and you can see that this whole section here, that's a new section. So I knew if I started there, he'd be able to find his spot. And then I just started playing there. I was in quick punch mode, and I just hit the 3 key on the numeric keyboard, and that puts us in record.
That whole section from the top, if that's okay.
Right there is where you want to punch?
Yeah.
Okay, got it. Here we go. Then right here, I just hit the number 3. Boom. And the whole point is to keep the session moving by not stopping and setting up an auto punch in or anything like that. Great. Really nice. Nice job.
Thanks.
So next we have a little steel string guitar, and it's just a tiny little guitar, and it barely makes any sound, and it's very bright. I think it's a little backpack guitar or something like that, and he just brought it in as something to play with steel strings, and so this has a totally opposite tone, and so I had to make choices to record this with the microphones and picking the right mics to minimize that harshness or brightness of the tone. So here's a little bit with a steel string guitar. Playing very tiny guitar, and it's got a very bright sound to it. So what I want to do is capture the guitar in such a way that that brightness isn't overpowering. And so instead of using the little small diaphragm condensers I had before, I decided to go ahead and use my tube mic again. And I'm just going to play around with the positioning and listen to the difference in the sound. As I get closer to the guitar, you'll start to hear more noises and it'll get brighter, but it'll also get a bigger bottom because of the proximity effect. So just play a little bit, Astro. So when you're miking a guitar, the sweet spot is again right going to be around this 12th fret or right about where the neck meets the body, and so that's kind of where I'm putting this mic. Right now I'm about 6 inches away, and we'll see how it sounds, and then I'll move it around some, and you'll hear the difference. And generally what I do is I listen to the instrument as he plays it with my ears. Play. And you can pinpoint where the mic can be positioned just by listening with your ears. That felt pretty balanced. Now play a little more of a part or a strum. So if he's going to play hard, the notes are going to jump out. And so I'm going to pull the mic back a little bit. This is more for a strumming type of sound. So I'm going to move the mic around as he plays. By the body, by the bridge, very thin. Okay, let's stop there for a second. So a 57 has a lot less gain, so I'm going to have to turn it up quite a bit. So I chose a microphone that everyone has, or most people have. So with the 57, it has a slower response. It has less transients because it's a dynamic mic. And it takes some of that nasty brightness or some of that kind of harshness when he strums. And let's move this around and see if we can find a good place. With the 57, I want to mic it very close. Okay, go ahead and play. So as I get close to the hole, it gets very boomy. Yeah, it's a little bit too close. Back up just a little bit. And then a lot of times what I'll do when I'm working with a single mic like this is I'll get the musician involved because they know what their guitar sounds like and they know what their playing sounds like and they've mic'd their instruments before. And it's a good idea just to get them get their input. And so I'm going to have Astro just move around the mic a little bit, and he's just going to move his body and swing the guitar around and listen to different sounds, and then find a sweet spot. He's going to come a little closer. He's going to come a little further. He's going to move a little left and a little right, and he's going to find the sweet spot for that guitar. So where does it feel balanced to you?
Right around here.
You know, play a little bit.
If I go in here too much, it gets too booming.
Yeah, it gets woofy.
So around almost closer to the 12. Closer to the 12 is
Yeah, it seems to be the spot.
too much, though, then it's too thin. Right in there.
Okay, play a little bit now with your sweet spot there, and I want to show you one more thing.
Okay.
Okay, now let's try coming at the guitar at an angle. Stand by. So what I'm setting up here is an off-axis response. We've talked about this in the past, where you shoot the mic in at a 45-degree angle, as opposed to directly on, and you're softening some of the harshness. You get less lows and a little less highs. Okay, so now I have the mic at a 45-degree angle, kind of pointing at that same area between the end of the fingerboard, or the end of the neck, and the sound hole. And so this is an off-axis sound, and it'll take some of that harshness away. All right, play a little bit. And so that's a lighter sound. So if you do a strumming part now. Okay, so that's very close mic'd. Now just back up just a few inches away as you play and see how that affects your dynamics. So it smooths things out. It smooths out the dynamics when you move the mic further away. And you get more of the sound of the whole instrument. It's not as peaky, and you don't get as much squeaks from the strings. So that's kind of what you can do with a 57 on an acoustic guitar. And this is a $100 mic. Well, thanks, Stro. That was great, man. I really appreciate all the help and your musicality. He sent me these tracks so he could play along and we could just concentrate on the guitar miking. And really, really, really nice job. And he put on new strings for me. He went the whole 9 yards here.
Yeah, it hurt my back doing that too.
I'm sure you did. He also brought this giant electric guitar amp, but I think we're running out of time, and there's no way I'm going to have all this stuff edited by class. So, I think we're going to postpone the electric part for a little while and just work on miking some acoustics and just listen to Astro play. That'll be fun enough.
Thanks so much for having me, Ken. I had a great time.
Yeah. So the best part of doing this session was the after session. And what we did after the session was I treated him to a nice Mexican restaurant. And you know that I love Mexican food from my little Toto video. So we went to a place called Salsa and Beer. So Salsa and Beer is a chain. I think they have about 3 restaurants in LA. And it's one of my absolute favorite. And these chips are incredible. They are paper thin and they're not overly salty, and they were piping hot, just came out of the oven. And this bean dip, we probably ate 2 or 3 baskets of chips and dip just between us two. And it was really incredible. This is the chicken fajitas there. It's a grill. It's a Mexican grill. And so it's just incredible on this hot platter. You can see the smoke coming off of them. And there's the guacamole and the tomatoes and oh my God, it's beans and rice, so good. And there's that beautiful beer at the end. So that made the whole session worthwhile. It was a lot of fun. We had a blast doing it, you know. And I've known Astro for a long time. He's a good buddy. So, you know, we did what we could and tried to just show you a few different techniques. It's kind of hard doing this stuff without being in a class. If we were in a class together in a studio, then we could actually just do this, you know, and you guys could hear it and you guys could move the mics yourself. And I'm just trying to come up with some way to make this more palatable since we're doing this online, you know. So I thought, I don't have a lot more for you guys. I spent all weekend doing this, so I'm pretty fried out here. But I would like to just play a little bit from the Pro Tools session. I know you guys are sick of that song by now, but I just want to show you a little bit of the miking technique differences and just explain a few things. So let's look at the Pro Tools session. Alrighty. So this is the session I sent you guys, and what I did was I split everything out so you could hear it. This little plug-in here, I didn't have my mic pre-adjusted properly, and so I just put a little trim plug-in across one side. So this little trim plug-in and a lot of Pro Tools plug-ins, they have this button here. And that button, if it's a stereo plug-in, it links the left and right side. So if it's checked, whoops, I don't want to do that. If it's checked, the left and right side will be linked together, and anything you do to this slider or the buttons or anything will happen to both sides. If you uncheck this, then you can come underneath here and click on this little thing and change the levels independently. So the right is at 0, and then the left is like down 3 dB. So I just put that on there as an after-the-fact fix them up. So I'm going to play these microphones a little bit. I'm going to actually just turn off the track for right now. And I want you to listen to them and be able to compare them. The first one is the ORTF, which is the wider 110-degree microphone setup. And then the next one is the XY, which are the two mics kind of at a 90-degree angle. And then this next one down here, the green one, and that is these are my spaced pair. So that's the two mics that are just two different microphones spaced apart. And then the last one is our MS Technique with the figure 8 mic. And the way that I have this working is I have the audio recorded onto 2 tracks because it was a stereo track. And I just brought it into the computer and sent it out to both tracks at the same time using a bus. And so I did the same thing with this trim plug-in here. So I took it out of link, and then on one side, I changed the polarity. See that little button there? That's our polarity button. And so the left side is fine, and the right side has the polarity flipped. And that's how we make our MS Technique work. So let's take a listen real quick here. This is our ORTF. So this is a very beautiful wide sound to me. So this is our XY pair. And if you listen carefully, you can hear that the melody or the chords are everything is more centered. It still has a stereo feel to it. It still has width, but the actual melody, it feels more centered to me. So let's listen one more time. Let me see if I can do this on my console. Is my console on? Yeah. Okay, now I can switch easy. So just listen to the difference. Here's the 110 degree microphones, and then I'll switch back and forth, and you can see them switch. So it's much more centered, but it's still stereo. Here's back to the 110. XY. So that's kind of the difference in those between those two. The other thing that's great about the XY is when you do sum it to mono, it sums very well. You don't lose a lot when you sum it to mono. So the next one down is going to be our spaced pair. Now this is probably going to be the phasiest and the widest sounding because we have two totally different microphones. I have a big fat tube mic on one side, and I have a very pristine condenser on the other side. So let's take a listen to that soloed. So that's very wide feeling. And with miking like this, the artist has to be very careful not to move. Because if he shifts his body at all, you're going to really hear that shift, and you'll hear the whole stereo field shifting. So you have to be careful, and you have to be aware when you use a very wide technique like this. And then the last one is our figure 8 microphones, the MS technique. And so I'm going to play you these, and I'll play it all together first. And we can compare that now with a wider type of pattern. Okay, and back to our phasey one. So if I take this the figure 8 mic and I turn it down, we just end up with the mono mic. There's not as much reverb on that mono mic. And as I start pushing these up, you can hear it get wider and wider. And that just sounds totally artificial. So you have to be careful how much you add if you want it to sound natural. And now I'm just going to go through all 4 of them one time. Back to the first pair. And here's the XY. And here's the spaced pair. And then finally, the MS technique. And let me show you the little MS technique trick. If you take the MS technique, the figure 8 microphone, and you pan them both in the center, well, you got to take the reverb off, it disappears, just like the phasing with our waveforms. So we've just got one side, the polarity reversed. It sounds very unnatural. This is what it sounds like when your speakers are out of phase. If you ever have your speakers out of phase, it sounds just like this. And you put the mono mic back in, and that the combination of the mono mic and the figure 8 makes the stereo spread. If you just use the figure 8, you've just kind of got a microphone that's out of phase with itself on one side. Alrighty, so that's it. That's my my 4 stereo miking techniques for you. While we're in Pro Tools here, there was a few things people needed when you were working last week, and I wanted to go over a few of these things. One of them that's really important is called split to mono. Some of you, when you were trying to record audio, you were accidentally using stereo tracks when you had a mono source. And so if you do that, like we can take this this backing track here, and we can select the track, and you can go up to track, and you can say split to mono. And what it'll do is it'll duplicate this stereo track, and it'll put it on 2 mono tracks for you. So if you end up getting that type of situation where you've got you know, the source just coming out of one side and you can't figure out what's going on, that's how you can fix it, right? But first of all, just make sure that you try to get the right type of track. Try to use a mono track for a mono source and a stereo track for a stereo source. Another thing, deleting files. So if you have this file right here, these new little things we just made here, this is actually just this same file here. It's just an alias of it, or a copy of it. It's not really 2 separate audio files. But if we were to take one of these files, and I'm just going to consolidate it. And consolidate just means write a new file over whatever you have selected. So if I had a bunch of regions here and I hit consolidate, it would make it into one long region. So now I have a new track. So this is a totally new audio track. I'm not going to damage my stereo track here. If I wanted to delete this audio file, I can come over here to the clips menu, and there's a little sub menu there with that little triangle there. And you can come down and you can scroll down to clear, and you can delete a file. There's a bunch of options that come up when you do that, right? You can permanently delete the file, erase from your hard drive, gone forever, careful, careful, danger, danger. You can move it to the trash, which is a little safer because if you mess up, then you can always go back and get it out of the trash. Or you can just remove it from the session. If you remove it from the session, that just means that you've removed it from the session. It's still on your hard drive. It's still in your audio files folder, and you're still taking up use for it, taking up space. And if you wanted to send a project to a client and you didn't want him to have this file, but you wanted to keep it on your hard drive, you wanted it for you. And so maybe you make a copy of this session and you want to delete this file because it's a bad recording or a bad take that you did. You don't want him to hear it. You can just remove it from the session and send him the version with the removed audio file. And that audio file is still on your drive. And if you save like a version 2 to give to him and you go back to version 1, you're still going to have that shady take that you did, right? So that's removing and deleting. I'm just going to delete this because I made it just as an experiment. I'm going to hit delete. And then you get a warning that says it's used in a track. And are you sure you want to do this? And I'm going to say yes. And there we go. And if I wanted that audio file back, I could just copy this stereo file, and I could go down and I could select 2 mono tracks, and I can paste it, and there it is back. Okay, so was that everybody got that? That's a pretty important one, being able to delete data. If you just take it out of your session folder or your audio file folder, and you just throw it away without deleting it from the session, when you send someone else the session, they're going to get all these errors that say, "Oh no, audio files are missing. What do I do? What do I do? Can you find them for me?" And you'll keep getting those errors until you go and you find those files that it's looking for, and you go over here and you select clear, and then you can remove them from the session. Okay, so that's how the audio file structure works. And then the same thing when we were talking about the I/O bus before. I sent you guys that session, and it had all of these buses that you probably weren't, that are named different or are different than your session. And the way you clean that up is you go under Setup menu, and you scroll down, and you bring up the I/O page, and then you've got these tabs at the top. And with the tabs, you're going to select Bus, and then you're going to select Default. And that'll get rid of anything and go back to default. Any weird name stuff, it'll get rid of. And it should bring you back and make your session happy again. You just click OK and you're done. So that's I/O cleanup. Quick Punch. I'm not sure if we talked about Quick Punch or not. That's what I was using to record the guitar, where I can just punch on the fly. And you have to turn that on to use it. And I recommend that you just leave it on all the time, because Quick Punch is it when you're recording. If I have a track here and I hit record, I hit play first. So if I have a track and I hit play, and I want to record onto this track, I have to put it in record. I can just hit play. And then just turn it down. If I want to punch in recording, I just hit the number 3. Right? And so now I'm erasing that track. And if I want to punch out again, I'm using the numeric keypad, and I'm hitting the 3 again. And it punches back out. So you can punch in, and you can punch out, and you can punch in, and you can punch out. Now what's happening underneath the hood here is, ever since you've started hitting, but you hit play, it's actually been secretively recording. And so if I go to this edit point and I drag this edit point back, I've recorded all this blank space in there. Look at that. Ever since I hit play, from where I hit play for, it's all underneath there. So this is a safety valve. Always use Quick Punch. If you don't use Quick Punch, wherever you hit the red button, that's where it starts recording. If you make a little mistake, you can't do a crossfade and fix it. So that's the important part about Quick Punch. You can also undo recordings. So if you've done a recording and you didn't like it, you can just hit undo, and it'll undo the recording. Or if you say, "Oh no, I didn't mean to do that," you can redo the recording. Undo and redo for recording. And then the last one we've talked about a little bit with effects, and that's our Solo Safe. And Solo Safe is you command click on the little S for solo. And what that does is, that means this track is always playing, no matter if you solo another track or not. So if I play some guitar, so I have reverb. If I didn't have Solo Safe enabled and I solo the guitar, all the reverb goes away. because the reverb isn't being soloed also. So that means I would have to solo this too to hear the reverb. But since I know as an engineer that I normally, whenever I solo a track, I don't want all the reverb to go away. I want to hear it the way I'm hearing it in the mix. So I want that reverb to stay. So that's where Solo Safe comes in. And you just command click on the S and it turns gray. The little S turns gray on the reverb track. And now, even though I don't have reverb soloed, I'm still hearing it. The thing you have to be careful with is if you accidentally solo safe an audio track or an instrument track, right? And then you decide, oh, I want to solo this up here. These tracks are still playing because they're solo safed. If I unsolo safe them, they go away. So that's solo safe, and you use that for reverb returns, and you also use that if you have a subgroup. And we haven't really gotten into that, but sometimes you can take a bunch of instruments and you can use one of your buses, and you can group a bunch of instruments together. Like you could take all of these tracks and you could put them all out bus 3 and 4. And you could have a subgroup, and maybe it's a stereo aux here, and maybe you want to just control the volume for everything, or you want to put effects on everything, or whatever you want to do with it. That subgroup would need to be soloed. So you would solo the subgroup, and that way, if you soloed an individual instrument, you would be able to solo an individual instrument and still hear it coming through all whatever processing you have going on. So we haven't really gotten into that. That's a little more advanced mixing techniques. We'll get into some mixing stuff coming up real soon. But what I want to do also tonight is give you your final assignment. So we're kind of done with the little homework assignments, and we're just going to do a final now. And so I put it in your folder. All right, so this is our final, and this is what's going to be a big part of your grade. And if you haven't been turning in homework assignments, you got 5 weeks now. So you can work on your final and you can start turning in some homework assignments that you've missed. At least you can get some credit for them. But this is going to be due. We're going to have a draft, and I really want to see a draft from you guys. Don't just fluff it off. And the draft is due on the 29th, November 29th. And then the final will be due the last day of class, which is December 13th. Okay. So undergraduates record at least 4 audio tracks and 4 MIDI tracks, and the song should be at least 2 minutes long. And graduate students record at least 4 audio tracks and 8 MIDI tracks. Song should be at least 3 minutes long. And I want you to try to use the techniques that we learned in class, and show me that you know how to use these techniques. And the song should have an arrangement to it. Don't just do the same repeated measures over and over and over. And we're going to work on balancing and mixing in the next few classes too. And so that's going to be a very important part of it. I don't want to see the tracks you turn in with red lights on the master bus. I want them to be the peaking, keep it around -6. That's pretty safe. And I don't want to see clipping. I don't want to see red lights on the master bus when you turn in your final. Don't wait till the end. Start early. If you procrastinate to the end, you're not going to be able to do a good job. The audio tracks can be whatever you like. For example, this is the same as what I said on the last thing, But I expect more out of graduate students who are music majors than I do out of undergrads that are theater, majors or any other kind of major. So that's it, and have fun with it. This is the whole point of the class, is learning how to use all these tools and these techniques, and hopefully hopefully you've learned something and you'll be able to make this happen and have some fun and be able to make music whenever you want, and not be relying on an outside engineer to help you out. Okay, anybody have any specific audio questions for me? Since you guys have been working with audio, I haven't looked at the papers you guys have turned in yet. But anybody have anything for me? Any questions?
I have a non-audio question.
Sure.
So maybe this is just really specific to me. I've noticed on a lot of my MIDI tracks, often it'll randomly just create this empty clip at the start of the track. Does that ever happen to you?
Yes, that can be, that can be all sorts of controller data. It can be anything. You don't have to worry about it. It's not really empty. It's probably like maybe you have a patch change, or maybe you have a MIDI volume setting at the beginning, or a MIDI pan setting, or something like that. If you go in your Pro Tools session and you look where it says wave on a track, where your waveform selector is, you can see that there's these other lanes that you can select. You can see your MIDI volume. Once you have any kind of automation on a track, like if I put a little MIDI volume dot there, that will turn yellow. So if you see that kind of information on your MIDI track, all you got to do is look at this underneath here, and you'll see something yellow there. And if it's a MIDI track, there's a lot more selections, because there's all the sustain and continuous controller data and MIDI volume and MIDI pan, and there's all that information there. So there'll be a whole long list of things, but you'll be able to tell easily because it'll be yellow when you've done something to it. It'll be highlighted. See, there's my volume. Okay, so that's probably what's going on, I would guess.
Got it. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else?
I have a question. So
Sure.
when I was doing the project, I like reached out to Justin because I have my software and my interface are from the school. So I reached out to Justin, and like when I plug in the interface, it registers as like a USB, and it says in the instructions that like it does that at first, and then it will like eventually be recognized as an interface or whatever. But it never did, and I can't get it to be my input like audio. And this might not be something that really applies to anyone else here, but like I didn't know how to fix that. Like my computer wouldn't even recognize it as an input like audio, not even just like Pro Tools.
Okay, did it have software? Does it have software that needs to be installed with it?
Yeah, it was a little confusing because like Justin told me that I didn't need to make an account on like the interface. Like it
Right.
says I have to do some like setup stuff.
Right.
When I plugged it in, he says I don't have to, but like I don't know. I downloaded what I thought needed to be downloaded, but it's still like it won't like recognize it. I don't know. I'm just I don't know.
Okay. So let's go here to the Focusrite website real quick and take a look. Okay, so this is the interface you have, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you scroll down, there's got to be somewhere here the software that you need for it. Download Scarlett. Oh, that's the user guide. Unless it's just supposed to be a plug and play type of thing. Support downloads. Focusrite. Choose your product. Boom. And then no driver required. So that means it's not a software issue. So you're not able to get any kind of, you can't play back through, you can't do anything with it. It's pretty much dead, right?
Yeah, like my computer recognizes that I plugged something in, but it doesn't recognize it as like an audio input. Like if I select it, like it won't, like the mic doesn't work.
And where are you selecting it? Are you selecting it up
In my
here?
audio settings, like I went to my like system preferences and then I went to sound.
Okay. Well, have you tried going here to your playback engine and setting it there?
No, I have not done that.
Okay. So let's talk about the playback engine a little bit. The playback engine is what determines the audio I/O for Pro Tools. And so the playback engine right now, I'm using my Universal Audio interface, but I have all these other options here. Right. And so there's another audio interface there. This is my little mixer that I have on the side. There's all these different audio interfaces, and you have to select the right one. So do you have Pro Tools open right now?
I'm trying to like speedily open it up. Okay, so I'm going to, sorry, you clicked setup.
Yeah, go to setup and then playback engine.
Okay,
And what is the playback engine?
oh, it does let me pick the Scarlett. Wait, it says if I pick the Scarlett, it says selecting this playback engine will automatically close my session. Oh, but I guess that fixed my problem.
Yeah, I think that's probably it. You know,
Okay, thank you.
you probably don't want to have it selected up here. Sometimes Pro Tools gets weird trying to share drivers, and I don't know that particular interface. I know the Pro Tools interfaces, it does not let you share drivers. So if you have a, expensive Pro Tools interface and you want to play your sound through it, you have to close Pro Tools and select it, for your Mac sound. And then when you want to open Pro Tools, you have to turn off your Mac sound and open Pro Tools. It doesn't play nice. So some interfaces behave differently.
Thank you so much. I did not think of that. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. No problem. There's a lot of stuff that we've gone over. I'm going to start going back through and just kind of reviewing everything. The last class, your assignments due, so the last class is just going to be a massive review. But I'm going to kind of go back through and cherry pick some things that we've discussed all through the class and start reviewing them in our classes. So that's it, guys. Have a great week, and I'll see you next week. We just have what do we have? A half dozen class? Not even a half dozen classes left. 5 classes left. So have a great week, and I'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank
Okay,
you.
Hi, Professor.
Good night.
Good night.